The golden sunset bathed the Amalfi Coast resort in shades of fire and honey, waves glittering like liquid gold. At the center of this paradise, billionaire Adrian Colton made his entrance. Tall, arrogant, and impeccably dressed, he wrapped an arm around his glamorous young girlfriend, Vanessa. Cameras flashed, guests whispered, and Adrian thrived in the attention. He was on vacation, but for him, every moment was another performance. "Adrian, you always know how to steal the spotlight," one investor chuckled, raising a glass of champagne. Adrian smirked, lifting his drink in a silent toast. Vanessa pressed closer, her diamond necklace catching the last streak of light. To the onlookers, they were the perfect couple. Wealthy, beautiful, untouchable. But beneath the music of the live string quartet, beneath the clinking glasses and soft laughter, destiny had prepared a cruel twist. Because at that very resort, stepping into the same glittering world Adrian thought he owned, was a woman he believed he had erased from his life forever. Emily Carter. His ex-wife. 6 months pregnant, her hand resting protectively over her belly, her posture proud despite the whispers already stirring in the air. It wasn't just her presence that shattered Adrian's smug performance. Walking beside her, calm and confident, was Dr. Lucas Harrington, an internationally renowned cardiologist. Unlike Adrian, Lucas didn't need diamonds or headlines to command respect. His quiet strength, his reputation for saving lives, spoke louder than any fortune. The crowd turned. The air shifted. Guests gasped, unsure where to look. The billionaire flaunting his girlfriend, or the ex-wife he had discarded, who now returned with a man of undeniable dignity. Adrian's glass froze halfway to his lips. His arrogant smile faltered, just for a second, but long enough for Vanessa to notice. Her painted lips tightened. "Who is she?" she whispered sharply. Adrian's jaw clenched. "No one," he muttered, but his eyes told another story. Fear, anger, and something even more dangerous. The sting of losing control. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't bow her head. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of dignity return. Lucas leaned slightly toward her, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You don't have to face him alone." The string quartet continued playing, but the melody had turned into a battle hymn. Around them, the glittering vacation paradise had transformed into an arena. Adrian had come to show off his new life, his new love, his power. But fate had brought Emily here for something far greater: justice, dignity, and a revelation that would leave every guest in shock. And when their eyes finally locked across the marble terrace, the war between past and present truly began. Emily Carter had once believed in fairy tales. She was raised in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, where evenings were filled with the smell of her mother's homemade bread and the sound of her father's old records playing in the background. Her parents weren't rich, but they were kind, and they taught Emily that love and loyalty mattered more than anything money could ever buy. By the time she was 23, Emily had carved out a life of quiet independence. She worked as an interior designer, specializing in creating warm, livable spaces for families who wanted homes that told their stories. Her clients loved her because she listened. She had the rare gift of turning a small, plain apartment into a sanctuary filled with heart. Then she met Adrian Colton. Adrian was everything her world was not: flashy, magnetic, commanding. When he walked into the small art gallery where Emily had been hired to help design the layout, her breath caught. He wasn't just a man, he was a storm. And when he turned his piercing eyes on her, she felt chosen, seen, as if all her hard work and quiet patience had led her to this moment. Adrian swept her off her feet in weeks. Lavish dinners, sparkling gifts, promises whispered against her skin. Friends warned her that men like Adrian lived for control, not companionship, but Emily chose to believe in him. She chose to believe in love. Their marriage began like a dream. Emily moved into Adrian's world of penthouses, private jets, and luxury vacations. At first, she thought she could balance it, her modest values with his hunger for power. She decorated their home not with expensive art, but with photographs of their trips together, flowers from the market, touches of warmth in a house that otherwise felt like a showroom. But slowly the cracks appeared. Adrian began criticizing her choices. Her dresses weren't elegant enough. Her career wasn't ambitious enough. Her gentle manner, once adored, was suddenly weak. The man who had once held her close now seemed embarrassed of her. He wanted a partner who dazzled the world, not a woman who preferred designing nurseries to attending investor meetings. The final blow came when Emily discovered she was pregnant. She had imagined Adrian's joy, the excitement of becoming a father. Instead, his smile was tight, his words cold. "A baby right now will slow me down," he had snapped one night. "Do you think investors want to see me pushing a stroller?" Her heart cracked, but she held on to hope. She told herself he would soften when he heard the heartbeat, when he felt the baby kick. But instead, Adrian grew colder, more distant, until finally, one evening filled with cruel words and empty threats, he ended their marriage, leaving Emily adrift. For weeks, Emily felt like a ghost wandering through the world. She moved into a small rented apartment, far away from the glittering skyline of Adrian's empire. Her hands worked tirelessly to build a new life, but her spirit ached. She carried not just a child inside her, but the weight of betrayal, the humiliation of being cast aside as though she were disposable. Yet beneath the sorrow, something fierce began to grow. Emily realized she could no longer wait for Adrian's approval or anyone else's validation. Her baby deserved a mother who stood tall, a woman who reclaimed her dignity. And so when life placed Lucas Harrington in her path, a man of compassion, wisdom, and strength, Emily did not see him as a savior, but as a reminder. She was not alone, and she was far stronger than she had ever believed. The stage was set, the broken wife was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to fight for her future. The Amalfi Coast was the kind of place that made the rich believe they were gods. Villas carved into cliffs overlooked an endless stretch of sapphire sea. Yachts dotted the horizon like floating palaces, each one a stage for champagne toasts and whispered deals worth millions. Tourists gawked from a distance, but only the elite were allowed inside this world, where every sunset felt purchased and every smile rehearsed. Adrian Colton thrived here. He arrived at the exclusive Villa Maraviglia with Vanessa on his arm, their luggage carried by staff who knew better than to make eye contact. Adrian loved the power of being noticed. His designer sunglasses reflected the envy of men and the admiration of women. For him, this vacation was more than leisure. It was proof. Proof that he had moved on. Proof that he was untouchable. The villa itself was a masterpiece. Marble floors cooled bare feet, while crystal chandeliers threw light onto walls lined with priceless art. The infinity pool spilled seamlessly into the ocean, blurring the line between reality and fantasy. Each evening, a live orchestra played on the terrace as the sun sank into the water, bathing the resort in molten gold. Here, appearances weren't just important, they were everything. Guests buzzed with rumors about Adrian. Some whispered about his latest investment in tech startups. Others gossiped about Vanessa, the glamorous newcomer with model-perfect features. She basked in the attention, sipping champagne and laughing too loudly at Adrian's jokes. To outsiders, they were a golden couple, youth and wealth perfectly paired. But the truth was far more fragile. Adrian wasn't here only for pleasure. Behind the scenes, he was in talks with European investors, eager to secure a deal that would cement his empire across the Atlantic. The vacation doubled as a performance, a showcase of his status. Every gesture, every smile was calculated. And Vanessa, she was his accessory, chosen to dazzle and distract. On the third evening, the villa hosted its most important event, a private gala on the terrace. Dozens of international power players gathered under strings of lights, sipping rare wines and trading secrets as the orchestra played soft arias. Adrian, dressed in a tailored midnight blue suit, positioned himself at the center of it all. Cameras clicked. He laughed, he boasted, he charmed. For Adrian, this was victory. His ex-wife forgotten, his reputation secure. Until the crowd shifted. The chatter softened, the music seemed to fade, and heads began to turn toward the grand staircase leading onto the terrace. Emily Carter appeared, her presence as startling as a clap of thunder in the middle of a sunny day. She wore a simple but elegant dress that flowed around her growing belly, her hand resting protectively against the curve of life inside her. She wasn't draped in diamonds or designer gowns, but there was something far more powerful about her, a quiet dignity that silenced the room. Beside her stood Dr. Lucas Harrington. His presence commanded instant respect. Unlike Adrian's carefully rehearsed charm, Lucas radiated calm authority. His tailored suit was understated, his posture relaxed, but his reputation spoke for him. Guests whispered his name, recognizing the world-renowned cardiologist whose lectures filled auditoriums and whose research had saved countless lives. The glamorous terrace, moments ago a stage for Adrian's triumph, now belonged to Emily and Lucas. Adrian's smirk vanished. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm, sensing the shift but not yet understanding it. The orchestra played on, but the melody no longer belonged to the billionaire who craved control. For the first time, Adrian Colton felt the ground beneath him begin to tremble. Adrian Colton had been called many things: visionary, tycoon, genius of the deal. But behind the magazine covers and the flashing cameras, he was something else entirely. A man who craved power more than he craved love. To understand him was to understand hunger, the kind that could never be satisfied. Born into privilege, Adrian had grown up in a mansion on the shores of Lake Michigan. His father, a ruthless banker, drilled into him one lesson above all. Emotions are weaknesses, people are pawns, and money is the only shield worth carrying. Adrian absorbed those lessons like gospel. By the time he graduated from Harvard, he didn't just want success, he wanted domination. He clawed his way into the business world, buying failing companies and stripping them for profit. Employees lost jobs, small investors lost savings, but Adrian gained headlines that hailed him as Chicago's rising star. He thrived on applause, on the envy of men and the desire of women. Every deal was a battle, and Adrian always played to win, even if it meant leaving a trail of ruin behind him. When he met Emily Carter, it wasn't love at first sight, it was conquest. She was different from the socialites who threw themselves at him. She had warmth, humility, and a heart untouched by greed. For Adrian, she was a challenge, a woman he couldn't simply buy. Winning her over gave him a rush. For a time, he even convinced himself it was love. But deep down, Emily was never his partner. She was his prize. The cracks began to show soon after their marriage. Adrian couldn't tolerate a wife who wanted a simple life, who cared more about designing cozy homes than attending galas. To him, her modesty was embarrassing, her kindness a weakness. The final straw was her pregnancy. Instead of celebrating, Adrian saw it as a chain. A child meant responsibility, distraction, and worst of all, a vulnerability his competitors could exploit. "You don't understand, Emily," he once said, his voice cold as steel. "This isn't the right time. I can't afford to look ordinary." The truth was, Adrian didn't want to be tied down. He wanted freedom to flaunt his wealth, to pursue women like Vanessa, beautiful, ambitious, eager to bask in his shadow. In his world, appearances mattered more than loyalty, and image mattered more than blood. So, on a night Emily would never forget, he ended it. No tears, no hesitation, just a contract, a pen, and a sneer that cut deeper than any blade. "You'll be fine," he had said, brushing off her pleas. "You're replaceable." Replaceable. That word had echoed in Emily's mind for months, poisoning her sleep, burning into her heart. He had discarded her as though she were nothing more than a broken ornament from his mansion. Now, standing on the terrace of Villa Maraviglia with Vanessa clinging to his arm, Adrian looked every inch the man he wanted the world to see. Confident, wealthy, untouchable. But inside, he was rattled. His mask was cracking. Emily's unexpected arrival had reopened the one wound he thought he had buried. And the presence of Lucas Harrington, a man respected not for money but for saving lives, was salt in that wound. For the first time in years, Adrian wasn't the brightest star in the room. He forced a laugh, tightening his grip on Vanessa. "Don't stare," he hissed under his breath. "She's nothing. She doesn't matter." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him, because deep down, Adrian knew something terrifying. Emily Carter was no longer his weakness. She was about to become his reckoning. The terrace glowed with the soft shimmer of lanterns strung above, casting golden light across marble floors polished to a mirror's shine. Waiters moved gracefully among the elite, their trays heavy with champagne flutes and caviar bites. Conversations flowed like the wine, each word a subtle weapon in the endless battle of status. And at the center of it all stood Adrian Colton, his arm wrapped proudly around Vanessa, as if she were the crown jewel of his empire. But all eyes weren't on him anymore. They were on Emily. Her appearance had been a ripple that turned into a wave, crashing over the glittering facade of Adrian's evening. Whispers followed her like shadows. Some guests gasped at the sight of her pregnant belly, Others murmured her name as though recalling a ghost. And yet, Emily held her head high. She didn't shrink, didn't hide. Her calm dignity was louder than any scandal. Adrian, however, couldn't allow that. Not here. Not in front of the investors he had worked months to impress. With a calculated smile, he raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming over the crowd. "I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This villa, this view, this is what life is about. Celebrating success, surrounding ourselves with beauty." He glanced deliberately at Vanessa, who giggled on cue, clinking her glass against his. Then, as if by accident, his eyes flicked toward Emily. The crowd followed his gaze, the tension sharpening like glass about to shatter. Adrian smirked. "And sometimes," he added, his tone dripping with venom masked as humor, "we leave the past behind. Some people weren't built for this world of ambition and power. They can't keep up. But that's life, isn't it? Not everyone can shine." Laughter rippled through the guests, polite, uneasy, but laughter nonetheless. Vanessa leaned closer, whispering something that made Adrian chuckle loudly, as though Emily were no more than a punchline. Emily's chest tightened. His words weren't subtle. They were knives wrapped in silk, meant to cut her down in front of everyone. The humiliation was suffocating, pressing against her ribs until she thought she might crumble. She could feel the sting of tears rising, threatening to betray her. But before the silence could consume her, Lucas stepped forward. Interesting philosophy. His deep voice carried across the terrace, steady and commanding. Conversation stilled. Even the orchestra faltered for a beat. Lucas's gaze locked on Adrian. "I was under the impression true power wasn't about stepping on others, but about lifting them up. Perhaps I was mistaken." A hush fell over the crowd. Guests exchanged glances, sensing the storm brewing. Adrian's smirk faltered for a moment, but then he recovered with a sneer. "And you are?" Lucas extended a hand with the kind of effortless confidence that needed no wealth to back it. "Dr. Lucas Harrington. I save lives for a living. A very different field, I suppose." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Adrian clenched his jaw, his knuckles whitening around his champagne glass. Vanessa tugged at his arm, urging him to ignore the challenge. But the damage had already been done. Emily's humiliation had been intercepted. Lucas had turned the sting of betrayal into a moment of strength. Still, the ache in her chest lingered. She had come here with dignity, and Adrian had tried to strip it away with a few cruel sentences. The crowd watched, spellbound. The perfect vacation had transformed into a battlefield, and no one could look away. And though Adrian smiled again, his eyes burned with a promise. This was only the beginning of his war against Emily. When the gala ended, the terrace lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the sound of the sea crashing below the cliffs. The laughter of the guests still echoed faintly, cruel reminders of the spectacle Adrian had orchestrated. Emily slipped away quietly, her heels clicking against the marble as she sought refuge in the solitude of her suite. The moment the door closed behind her, her mask cracked. She leaned against the wall, her breath shuddering, tears spilling before she could stop them. For hours she had stood tall, absorbing Adrian's venom, refusing to let him see her break. But alone, with only the faint hum of the ocean outside, the weight was unbearable. She pressed a trembling hand to her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I wanted to be stronger for you." The baby kicked faintly, as if reminding her she wasn't truly alone, but tonight even that comfort felt fragile. Every word Adrian had thrown at her replayed in her mind. Not everyone can shine. Some people can't keep up. The guests' uneasy laughter had pierced her like needles. How quickly people chose sides, how eager they were to laugh at the woman discarded by a man with money. Emily walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at her didn't look like the Emily she remembered. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her once bright spirit dimmed. She touched her reflection, her voice barely audible. "When did I become this?" A soft knock interrupted her spiral. "Emily?" Lucas's voice was calm, gentle. "It's me." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to shut him out, to drown in her sorrow alone. But another part, the part that still clung to hope, opened the door. Lucas stood there, his expression a mixture of concern and quiet strength. He didn't push inside. He simply waited, giving her space. "I don't belong here," she whispered, shaking her head. He was right. "I'm nothing compared to them. Compared to..." Huh. Lucas stepped forward, his eyes steady. Don't you dare believe that. Adrian thrives on control. He humiliates you because he fears you. He knows what you carry, your dignity, your resilience, threatens the image he clings to. Her tears fell harder. But it hurts, Lucas. It hurts so much. I thought I had buried the pain, but tonight it came back, all of it. He didn't interrupt. He let her cry, his silence a safe harbor. Then, when her sobs softened, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you know. The fact that you walked into that terrace tonight, pregnant, alone, and unafraid to face him, that's strength. Don't confuse the pain of betrayal with weakness. They are not the same. Emily searched his face, desperate to believe him. His words were steady, grounding, but the storm inside her still raged. She sank into the armchair by the window, staring at the horizon where the sea melted into the night sky. What if I can't do this? She asked softly. What if I fail this baby? What if Adrian was right, and I don't belong in his world, or any world like it? Lucas crouched in front of her, his voice low but unwavering. You don't need to belong in his world. You'll build your own, and when you do, it will be stronger, kinder, and far more powerful than anything he could ever create. Her lips trembled, torn between despair and the faint spark of hope his words ignited. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to stand again. But for now, exhaustion pulled her under. As Emily closed her eyes, Lucas whispered, "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, you rise." But what neither of them knew was that Adrian was already plotting his next move, determined to crush her spirit once and for all. The morning after the gala, the sun rose bright over the Amalfi Coast, but for Emily, the light felt harsh, exposing every bruise on her spirit. She sat on the balcony of her suite, sipping tea she could barely swallow, staring at the endless blue of the sea. The world looked calm, but inside, her heart churned with doubt. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a hotel staff member holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. "For you, Signora," he said with a bow. Emily frowned. She hadn't expected mail. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Inside was a letter. No signature, just bold, typed words. Adrian is hiding more than his mistress. Be careful. Ask about the Zurich account. Her breath caught. Zurich? She had no idea what it meant, but the warning chilled her blood. She tucked the letter away just as Lucas entered, carrying a tray of breakfast. "You look pale," he observed, setting it down. "Did something happen?" Emily hesitated, then showed him the note. Lucas scanned it, his brow furrowing. "This isn't just gossip. Whoever sent this knows something real. Zurich is a financial hub. If Adrian has an account there, it could mean hidden money or worse." Her heart pounded. Memories surfaced. Late nights when Adrian disappeared without explanation. The second phone he always kept locked. The coded calls in languages she didn't understand. She had ignored them, convincing herself she was paranoid. But now it made sense. Lucas leaned closer. "Emily, listen to me. If Adrian is hiding assets, it could explain why he wanted you out of his life. A child complicates his secrets. He couldn't risk you finding out." Her hand flew to her belly. "So he threw me away to protect himself." The words were bitter, but beneath them was fire. For months she had felt powerless, humiliated. Now, for the first time, she glimpsed the truth. Adrian feared exposure more than he feared losing her. Before Lucas could answer, the suite phone rang sharply. Emily froze. Slowly she picked it up. "Emily." Adrian's voice slithered through the line, calm but edged with steel. "We need to talk." She gripped the receiver. "There's nothing left to say." "Oh, there's plenty," he sneered. "Don't think I didn't notice your little show last night. You embarrassed me in front of my investors. That won't happen again. Tonight, I'll make sure everyone sees exactly who you are. Weak, pitiful, and unworthy." Her stomach twisted, but she forced her voice steady. "And what about Zurich?" Silence. A beat too long. Then his voice dropped, low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about. Stay out of things you don't understand." The line went dead. Emily's hand shook as she lowered the receiver. Lucas's eyes burned with determination. "He just confirmed it. He's hiding something huge. And if we can prove it, Emily, you won't just win your dignity back. You'll destroy the mask he hides behind." Emily's pulse quickened. For the first time since her marriage had crumbled, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like someone holding a weapon, a secret powerful enough to shift the balance. Still, fear lingered. Adrian was dangerous, If he sensed she was coming for him, he'd strike first. Lucas placed a hand on hers, grounding her. This isn't just about revenge, it's about freedom. The truth will set you free. Emily inhaled deeply, her tears drying into resolve. Adrian thought he still controlled the game, but Zurich was the thread that could unravel his empire. And Emily Carter, the woman he had discarded, was ready to pull it. The letter about Zurich had done something to Emily. It was as if a spark had been lit inside a long dark room. For months she had felt small, invisible, discarded. But now the knowledge that Adrian had secrets he feared, shifted everything. For the first time, she held a card he couldn't control. Still, transformation never happens in a single moment. It comes in waves, slow and relentless, reshaping the shore until it's unrecognizable. For Emily, the first wave was acceptance. She stood before the mirror, brushing her hair back from her face. The woman staring back wasn't broken anymore. The tear-streaked cheeks from the night before were gone. Her eyes, though tired, carried a glint of fire. She touched her belly gently, whispering, "We'll be okay, I promise you." Lucas noticed the shift the moment he walked into the suite. "You look different," he said, setting down a folder of medical notes he'd been reviewing. Emily managed a small smile. "Maybe I finally remember who I am." She spent the morning walking along the cliffside gardens of the villa. The sea air filled her lungs, clearing out the poison of Adrian's words. For too long she had let him define her. Weak, replaceable, unworthy. But those labels belonged to him, not her. She was more than the woman he tried to erase. She was a mother, a designer, a survivor. The second wave was preparation. Lucas had discreetly contacted an old colleague in Zurich, someone who knew how to trace accounts hidden behind shell companies. The process would take time, but it was a start. "If Adrian has been moving money, we'll find it," Lucas promised. "And when we do, the truth will speak louder than his lies." Emily nodded, determination replacing fear. She no longer felt like prey. She was beginning to feel like a fighter. She also made changes in herself. She traded the soft maternity dresses Adrian used to mock for something sharper. A tailored navy gown that hugged her figure without hiding her pregnancy, paired with simple pearls. She styled her hair into waves, not to impress Adrian or his circle, but to remind herself she wasn't invisible. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman of strength, not shame. That evening, Lucas found her reviewing sketches on her tablet, designs for a community housing project she had once dreamed of launching before Adrian had convinced her it was a waste of time. "You're working?" Lucas asked with surprise. Emily looked up, her eyes bright. "I stopped creating because he told me my dreams didn't matter. But they do, and I want my child to know their mother never gave up on herself." Lucas smiled, admiration flickering in his gaze. That's the Emily I knew was still in there. The third wave was resolve. Emily knew Adrian wasn't going to let her go quietly. He had hinted at another public humiliation, something he was planning for that very night. The old Emily would have hidden, avoided the spotlight. But the new Emily was ready to face him. When the invitation came, a private dinner with select investors at the villa's grand hall, she didn't hesitate. She would go. Not as his discarded wife, not as his victim, but as the woman he underestimated. She placed a hand over her belly, feeling the steady kick of life within her. "We're not running anymore," she whispered, because now Emily Carter wasn't just surviving. She was preparing for war. The villa's grand hall glittered with wealth that evening. Long tables were draped in white linen, adorned with crystal goblets and gold-rimmed plates. Soft candlelight reflected off towering glass windows, casting a glow over the faces of Europe's most influential investors. This wasn't just dinner. It was theater, and Adrian Colton was the star. He moved through the room with Vanessa clinging to his arm, his laugh loud enough to command attention. "Gentlemen," he boomed, "tonight you dine with the future. My empire is expanding across continents. Invest now, and you'll share in the kind of power most men only dream about." The crowd applauded politely, their eyes gleaming with curiosity. Adrian basked in it, certain nothing could ruin his performance. Until the doors opened. Emily entered the hall, Lucas walking at her side. The soft murmur of conversation stilled instantly. She was radiant in her navy gown, her hand resting proudly over her pregnancy. She didn't slink in like an uninvited guest, she commanded the space as though it belonged to her. Adrian's smirk faltered. What is she doing here? He hissed to Vanessa, but it was too late. The investors had already turned their attention toward Emily. She paused only a moment, her heart pounding. Then, with steady steps, she crossed the floor and stood opposite Adrian, her voice clear and calm. "Forgive the interruption. I thought it only fair the truth joined the table tonight." A ripple went through the guests. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Emily, this isn't your stage. Leave now before you embarrass yourself further." But Emily didn't flinch. "I'm not here to embarrass myself, Adrian. I'm here to remind you, and everyone else, that appearances aren't the same as integrity." The room hushed. Adrian forced a laugh. "Integrity? Coming from a woman who couldn't keep up with my world?" Emily met his gaze steadily. "Or maybe it was you who couldn't keep up with mine. The world of loyalty, honesty, and love. You threw away your family for an image, and now that image is cracking." The investors shifted in their seats, watching the exchange like a high-stakes match. Adrian's face reddened, but before he could retaliate, Lucas spoke. His voice was calm, but his words cut like steel. "Gentlemen, I don't usually involve myself in financial discussions, but I will say this. When a man hides money in Zurich, when he conceals assets even from his own family, it raises questions about how he treats his partners. Business or otherwise." Gasps erupted around the table. The word Zurich landed like thunder. Adrian's glass slammed against the table, wine splattering across the linen. "That's a lie," he roared. "Baseless slander." But his voice cracked under the weight of panic. The investors exchanged wary glances. In their world, hidden accounts weren't whispers. They were warning signs. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ask him yourself. Ask Adrian where he keeps his money. Ask why he needed to erase me to protect his secrets." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her smile brittle. Adrian's carefully constructed image was slipping, and everyone could see it. One of the older investors leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Mr. Colton, is there truth to this claim?" Adrian's mouth opened, but no words came. His silence spoke louder than any denial. Emily straightened her shoulders. She no longer felt small, no longer felt discarded. Tonight, in this hall filled with power, she had taken control. And as Adrian's empire trembled on the edge of exposure, Emily Carter finally tasted her first victory. Adrian Colton had spent his entire life mastering the art of control. But tonight, as investors whispered and Vanessa shrank beside him, he felt it slipping through his fingers like sand. Emily's words and Lucas's calm accusations had left cracks in his armor. And Adrian was a man who would rather destroy the board than lose the game. When the dinner ended, Adrian vanished into the night, leaving Vanessa to offer awkward excuses to the guests. Emily returned to her suite, shaken but resolute. She had exposed him, but she knew Adrian too well. He wouldn't lick his wounds quietly. He would come for her. And he did. Near midnight, Emily awoke to the sound of her door handle rattling. Her heart stopped. She rose quickly, clutching her robe around her and pressing a hand protectively over her belly. "Who's there?" The door burst open. Adrian stormed in, his face twisted with fury. He reeked of whiskey, his tie loosened, his composure gone. "You think you can humiliate me?" he hissed, slamming the door shut behind him. "In front of investors? In front of the entire world?" Emily's back pressed against the wall. "Adrian, you need to leave. You're drunk." "I need to remind you who I am," he advanced, his eyes burning. "I made you. Without me, you're nothing. And now you think you can destroy me with whispers about Zurich? You don't even know what you're talking about." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to stand firm. "I know enough. I know you're hiding money. I know you tried to erase me so no one would ask questions. And now they are asking." Adrian's fist slammed against the wall inches from her head. She flinched, but didn't move away. His rage was terrifying, but so was her resolve. "You should have stayed quiet," he growled. "You should have remembered your place. But you always had to push, didn't you? Always had to make me look weak." Before Emily could respond, another voice thundered through the room. "Enough." Lucas stepped inside, his presence filling the suite like a shield. He had been nearby, sensing Adrian's anger would drive him to this. His eyes locked on the billionaire, steady and unyielding. "You will not touch her. Not now, not ever." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "The doctor, always playing the hero. Do you think you can protect her from me? From the kind of power I hold?" Lucas didn't flinch. Power built on lies always collapses, and you're collapsing faster than you realize. For a moment, the tension was unbearable. Adrian's fists clenched, his chest heaving. Emily stood between them, her fear mixing with a strange, rising pride. She had always faced Adrian alone before. But tonight she wasn't alone. Adrian finally stepped back, his sneer sharp as a blade. "This isn't over," he spat. "If you think you've won because of one dinner, you're more foolish than I thought. Tomorrow I'll bury you. Both of you." He stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. Silence followed, broken only by Emily's uneven breathing. Lucas turned to her, his voice soft. "Are you all right?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of survival. "He's losing control," she whispered, "and that makes him dangerous." Lucas nodded grimly. "Yes, but it also means he's afraid, and fear makes men like Adrian reckless. That's when they make mistakes, and when they do, we'll be ready." Emily sat down, her hands still trembling. She knew the war had only escalated. Adrian wasn't going to surrender. He was going to strike harder. And as the night deepened, one truth became clear. The next battle could break everything. The morning after Adrian's drunken intrusion, the villa buzzed with whispers. News of the confrontation at the investors' dinner had spread like wildfire. Staff whispered behind silver trays, guests traded rumors over breakfast cappuccinos, and every glance toward Emily carried a question. Was it true? Did Adrian Colton really have something to hide? Emily tried to steady herself, focusing on breathing through the storm. But the storm was only growing darker. By noon, Vanessa struck. She appeared in the courtyard like a queen arriving at her coronation, draped in a crimson silk dress that clung to her curves, her lips painted to match. A group of journalists had been allowed into the villa under the pretense of covering Adrian's business expansion. But Vanessa had her own plan. She walked straight to them, her voice carrying like a dagger wrapped in velvet. "You should know," she began sweetly. "Emily Carter has been causing quite the scene. She's desperate, poor thing, clinging to lies about Zurich, trying to drag Adrian down because she can't accept that their marriage is over." The journalists scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Vanessa leaned in closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. "It's sad, really. She's pregnant, alone, and unstable. Imagine the stress on that poor baby, being carried by someone so fragile." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The words spread like poison, twisting Emily's dignity into something pitiful. Vanessa smiled as though she had just delivered a charity speech. For her, this was the game. Shame the ex-wife, erase her credibility, and secure her own place at Adrian's side. Emily arrived moments later, unaware of the ambush. When she stepped into the courtyard, all eyes turned. The journalists circled like vultures, microphones thrust toward her. "Emily, is it true you're fabricating stories about hidden accounts? How do you respond to claims you're unstable? Are you endangering your baby?" Her heart pounded. The venom in their voices was worse than Adrian's taunts. Public humiliation, this was Vanessa's weapon. Lucas moved quickly, stepping between Emily and the reporters. His calm voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough. You have no right to harass a pregnant woman." But Emily raised a trembling hand. "No, Lucas, let me speak." She faced the crowd, her voice unsteady at first but growing stronger. "I am not unstable. I am not desperate. I am a woman who gave everything to a man who discarded me. And if you think I'm lying about Zurich, ask Adrian yourself. Ask him why he won't answer the question." The courtyard went silent. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing the fire in her eyes. Vanessa's smile faltered. Emily continued, her voice clear. "You can try to paint me as weak, but I'm still standing, and I will keep standing, for myself, for my child, and for the truth." The journalists erupted with questions, the narrative already shifting. Some still eyed her with skepticism, but others leaned forward, intrigued. Vanessa's carefully spun attack had begun to unravel. Adrian appeared then, storming into the courtyard. His eyes blazed when he saw Emily holding the crowd's attention. "Enough," he shouted. "Emily, go back to your room before you embarrass yourself further." But this time, the power in his voice rang hollow. The guests didn't see a commanding billionaire anymore. They saw a man cornered. Emily didn't move. She met his glare, her chin high. "The only one embarrassed here is you, Adrian." The crowd gasped. The tension snapped like a taut string. For the first time, Adrian realized he was no longer in control of the story. And as Vanessa tugged at his arm, panic flashing in her eyes, Adrian knew the war was slipping from his hands. By evening, the villa felt like a cage. The corridors buzzed with whispers, the air heavy with suspicion. Adrian's empire was wobbling, and Emily could sense the rage simmering behind his polished mask. She had wounded his pride, exposed cracks in his reputation, and now he was cornered. And a cornered man like Adrian was dangerous. Emily sat in her suite, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The baby kicked softly, a reminder of what was at stake. Lucas paced nearby, his jaw tight. "He won't stop," he said. "You embarrassed him twice, in front of investors and then in front of the press. Adrian doesn't forgive, Emily. He retaliates." A chill ran through her. "What will he do?" Lucas hesitated, then met her eyes. "Anything. That's why we have to be ready." The words proved prophetic. Just after midnight, Emily was jolted awake by a sharp noise. The suite door rattled violently, then burst open. A masked man stormed in, his movements quick and aggressive. Emily froze, her heart slamming in her chest. This wasn't Adrian, but it was his doing. "Stay back," she cried, clutching her belly. The intruder grabbed her arm roughly. Panic surged. The pressure on her abdomen sent a sharp pain shooting through her body. She gasped, terrified for her baby. Before he could drag her further, Lucas appeared from the adjoining room. He lunged, tackling the man to the ground. A violent struggle broke out, fists, grunts, the sound of furniture crashing. Emily pressed herself against the wall, trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Run, Emily!" Lucas shouted, but she couldn't move. Fear rooted her to the spot. The intruder swung wildly, catching Lucas across the jaw. Blood sprayed, but Lucas fought back with everything he had, finally slamming the man against the dresser. The mask slipped, revealing a face Emily recognized, Adrian's private security chief. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't random. Adrian had sent him. The man wrenched free and bolted, disappearing into the corridor before more staff could arrive. Lucas staggered to his feet, breathing hard, his lips split. "Are you hurt?" Emily shook her head, clutching her stomach. "The baby," she whispered, terror in her voice. Lucas knelt beside her, his hands steady as he checked her pulse and breathing. "You're both alive. That's what matters." But Emily knew it was more than just an attack. It was a message. Adrian wasn't going to rely on whispers or humiliation anymore. He was escalating to something far darker. Moments later, hotel security rushed in, but Emily's voice trembled as she told them the truth. "The man who attacked me works for Adrian Colton." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. No one wanted to accuse a billionaire openly, but the evidence was undeniable. Lucas pressed a bloodied towel against his jaw, his eyes blazing. "This isn't just a scandal anymore, it's criminal." Emily sank into the armchair, her body shaking, her baby kicking wildly as if sensing her fear. She realized then that Adrian wasn't simply fighting to save his reputation, he was fighting to destroy her completely. Lucas placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We'll protect you, Emily. But this means war. You can't stay on defense anymore. You have to strike back." Her tears fell silently, but beneath them a new fire was forming. Adrian had nearly broken her, nearly endangered her child, but he had also revealed the truth. He would stop at nothing. And if she wanted to survive, neither could she. The war for Emily's future had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The attack changed everything. Emily had been shaken to her core, but in the aftermath, something inside her hardened. She was done being prey. Adrian had crossed a line, and now she needed proof, something undeniable, something that would end his charade forever. Lucas knew it too. The morning after the assault, he placed a laptop on the table in Emily's suite. His lip was swollen, but his eyes burned with resolve. "I called in a favor," he explained. "A friend of mine in Zurich, he works in international finance. If Adrian's hiding money, he'll find it." Emily leaned forward, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the encrypted files Lucas's contact had sent. Numbers filled the screen. Account balances, wire transfers, shell corporations. At first it was overwhelming, but then one detail leapt out at her. Zurich private bank account, number 774211, registered to Colton Enterprises Holdings. Beneficiary, Adrian Colton. Recent activity, $50 million transfer, offshore. Her breath caught. He moved $50 million last month. Lucas nodded grimly. "And that's just one account." Look here, there are others. He's been siphoning money from his investors for years, hiding it overseas. Emily's heart pounded. So he didn't just abandon me for vanity. He abandoned me because I was a risk. If I found this, I could expose him. Exactly, Lucas said. And now you have found it. This isn't gossip anymore. This is evidence. For a long moment, Emily stared at the screen. Proof. Hard, undeniable proof. The kind of truth Adrian couldn't charm or threaten his way out of. She felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that she finally held a weapon. Sorrow that the man she once loved had been this corrupt all along. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of release. All those nights I begged him to just be honest with me. All those times he told me I was paranoid. He made me feel crazy. And all along, he was the liar. Lucas placed a steady hand on hers. Gaslighting is how men like Adrian keep power. But you're not under his spell anymore. You have the truth now, and truth is stronger than money. Emily exhaled shakily, her hand resting over her belly. For months I've been afraid. Afraid of him, of being alone, of failing this baby. But now, maybe I can finally fight back. Not just for me, but for us. Lucas gave a faint smile. Then we fight smart. We don't go to Adrian directly. We let the investors, the press, the court see this. Once the world knows, he won't be able to bury it. Emily nodded, her resolve sharpening like steel. She imagined Adrian's face when the facade crumbled, when the world saw him for who he truly was. For once, he wouldn't be the man holding the power. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. Be careful. Adrian knows you're digging. He won't stop. Emily's stomach tightened. Someone inside the villa was watching her. Someone who knew the game was escalating. She turned to Lucas, her voice steady despite the fear prickling at her spine. Then we move fast. Before he strikes again. The sea crashed against the cliffs outside, fierce and relentless. It matched the rhythm in her chest. For the first time since Adrian had shattered her world, Emily didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like the storm. And with Zurich as her weapon, Adrian Colton's empire was about to face its reckoning. The evidence from Zurich weighed heavily in Emily's hands, not as a burden, but as a weapon. For the first time in months, she wasn't merely surviving Adrian's cruelty, she was preparing to end it. She spent the morning working with Lucas, compiling the bank statements into a clean dossier. Every transfer, every shell company, every offshore account told a story of greed and deception. Once this goes public, Lucas said, sliding another document into the folder, Adrian won't just lose investors, he'll face federal charges. It's over. Emily nodded, her heart steady. Then let's make it public. They agreed to meet a trusted journalist in town, someone Lucas knew from his medical charity work. It was risky, but it was the fastest way to expose the truth. Emily packed the documents into her bag, her hand brushing protectively over her belly. For once, she felt strong, almost fearless. But Adrian sensed the shift. That evening, as the villa buzzed with another glittering cocktail event, Adrian watched Emily from across the terrace. His eyes burned with hatred, but beneath the rage was panic. He had underestimated her. And worse, she had found something. He could feel it. Slipping away from the crowd, Adrian dialed a number. She has something. I don't care what it takes. Stop her before she leaves this villa. The order was clear, and Adrian was desperate. Later that night, Emily and Lucas slipped quietly out of the villa toward the waiting car that would take them into town. The air was cool, the sea breeze sharp with salt. Emily clutched the bag tightly against her chest, every step carrying the weight of destiny. But halfway down the dimly lit path, headlights blinded them. A black SUV screeched to a halt, blocking their way. The doors swung open, and two men stepped out. Broad, cold-eyed, the kind of men who answered only to Adrian. Lucas moved in front of Emily instantly. "Stay behind me," he whispered. One of the men sneered. "Mr. Colton would like a word. Hand over the bag and no one gets hurt." Emily's pulse thundered. She clutched the documents tighter, shaking her head. "No, not this time." The men advanced. Lucas braced himself, ready to fight, but they were outnumbered. For a moment, fear threatened to swallow Emily whole. She thought of the baby, of the danger pressing in on all sides. But then she remembered Adrian's voice, sneering that she was replaceable, weak, nothing. And suddenly, fear turned into fire. Emily's voice rang out, strong and unshaken. If you touch me, if you touch this child, every investor in that villa will know exactly who sent you. Do you think Adrian can survive that scandal? Do you think he can bury an attack on a pregnant woman? The men froze. For the first time, hesitation flickered across their faces. They weren't hired thugs from the streets. They were part of Adrian's world, and reputation mattered there. Lucas seized the moment. He pulled Emily close and guided her around the SUV, his voice steady. Keep moving, don't stop. They hurried into the shadows, their breaths ragged. Behind them, the men didn't pursue. Adrian's order had faltered under Emily's defiance. By the time they reached the town, Emily's legs trembled, but her spirit soared. She had faced Adrian's power head-on, and she hadn't broken. Lucas looked at her with admiration. You just turned his own weapon against him. His pride, his image, that's where he's weakest. Emily exhaled shakily, clutching the bag of evidence. Then tomorrow, the world sees the truth. But even as hope swelled, Emily knew Adrian wouldn't surrender quietly. His next move would be his most dangerous yet. The town square glowed with lanterns, its cobblestone streets alive with late-night laughter and the scent of espresso drifting from corner cafes. For most, it was a night of leisure. But for Emily, it was the night everything would change. She and Lucas slipped into a quiet trattoria, tucked between two narrow alleys. Inside, a lone man sat at a corner table, a notebook beside his untouched espresso. He rose as they entered, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Carter?" he asked softly. Emily nodded. "You're Daniel Ross?" The journalist gave a brief smile. "International finance is my beat. When Lucas told me you had something on Adrian Colton, I didn't believe it. But if what you say is true, this could be the biggest story of the decade." Emily slid the folder across the table, her hands trembling slightly. "It's all here. Zurich accounts, transfers, shell corporations. He's been siphoning millions from investors, hiding it offshore. I know because I lived with him. I saw the late-night calls, the second phone he kept hidden. I didn't understand then, but I do now." Daniel opened the folder and scanned the documents. His eyes widened. "This is undeniable. If we publish this, Adrian's empire collapses overnight." Lucas leaned forward. "It has to be more than a collapse. He can't just walk away and build something new. The evidence needs to go to authorities too." Daniel nodded. "Agreed. I'll send copies to the SEC and international regulators, but make no mistake, once this goes public, Adrian will know exactly who exposed him. He won't go quietly." Emily's chest tightened, but she didn't look away. "Let him come. I'm done hiding." For the first time, she felt the strength of her choice, not just to survive Adrian, but to fight back. She had feared him for too long. Now she held the truth, and truth was more powerful than his money. Meanwhile, back at the villa, Adrian was unraveling. He paced his suite like a caged animal, his fists clenched, his eyes bloodshot. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed, her voice shaking. "Adrian, maybe we should just leave. Take the jet, go back to New York, ride this out." "Leave?" Adrian snapped, his voice venomous. "Do you know what happens if this story gets out? I lose everything. Everything." He slammed a glass against the wall, shards scattering across the marble. Vanessa flinched, but he didn't notice. His mind was consumed by rage. "She thinks she can destroy me," he muttered, pacing faster. "Emily Carter, my little charity case of a wife. She was nothing until I made her, and now she dares to challenge me." His phone buzzed. A text flashed across the screen. They met with the journalist. Documents handed over. Adrian's blood boiled. "So she wants war," he growled. "Then war it is." Vanessa tried again, her voice trembling. "Adrian, what if it's too late?" He turned on her, his eyes dark and wild. "It's never too late when you're me." At the trattoria, Daniel closed the folder and slid it back into his bag. "This will take time to verify and publish, but once it's out, Adrian's finished. You need to be ready for the storm that follows." Emily nodded. Her hands still trembled, but her voice was steady. "I've lived in his storm for years. Now it's his turn to face mine." Outside, the church bells tolled midnight, their echoes rolling over the quiet town. It was a signal, a warning, a countdown. Because as Emily handed the truth to the world, Adrian Colton was already planning his final, most dangerous strike. The next day, the air in the villa was charged with tension. Word of Adrian's offshore accounts had begun to leak. Investors were making urgent calls, journalists lingered by the gates, and whispers followed Adrian like shadows. His empire was crumbling. and he knew exactly who had struck the first blow. Emily. She tried to stay calm, keeping close to Lucas as they walked through the villa's halls. But her nerves buzzed with unease. Adrian was too quiet, too still. For a man who thrived on power, silence was never a good sign. By evening, a note arrived at her suite, handwritten in bold, deliberate strokes. "Meet me in the lower terrace garden at midnight. Alone. If you don't, you'll regret it." Emily's stomach twisted. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Adrian. Lucas read the note, his expression dark. "It's a trap. He wants you isolated." "I know," Emily whispered, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "But if I don't go, he'll come for me another way. Maybe worse." Lucas shook his head. "You don't face him alone. Not anymore." But deep down, Emily understood something. Adrian needed to be confronted. Running from him had never worked, and maybe, just maybe, facing him on her terms would end this once and for all. That night, the villa slept under a silver moon. Emily slipped into the lower terrace garden, her footsteps soft against the stone path. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine, but the beauty of the night was poisoned by dread. Adrian was already waiting. He stood near the fountain, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight, his tailored suit immaculate as always. But his face was different, harder, almost feral. "You came," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I wasn't sure you had the courage." Emily's heart pounded, but she forced her chin high. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." His laugh was bitter. "You should be. You've ruined me, Emily. Years of work, gone because you couldn't accept your place. You think handing a few papers to a journalist makes you powerful? You're still nothing without me." "Then why are you so afraid?" she shot back. "If I'm nothing, why send your men to attack me? Why chase me in the dark? Because deep down, you know the truth. You're the weak one, Adrian, and now the world knows it too." His jaw tightened, fury flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. I built this empire. I can rebuild it. But you—" He stepped closer, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. "You won't be around to see it." Emily's breath caught. His threat was clear. She glanced around, but the garden was deserted. And then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. "Lucas." "I told you she's not alone," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the night. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "The doctor again. Always the hero." Lucas didn't flinch. "No, Adrian. Not the hero, just the witness. Because after tonight, the world will know everything. What you've done, what you've tried to do, and you won't escape it." Adrian's mask cracked. For the first time, desperation flickered across his face. He lunged toward Emily, his rage boiling over, but Lucas caught him, forcing him back. The struggle was raw, primal, money and power against integrity and truth. Emily stood frozen, her heart racing until she realized something. Adrian wasn't untouchable anymore. He was human, flawed and cornered. And for the first time in her life, she saw him not as a monster to fear, but as a man already losing. The trap he had set for Emily had become his own downfall. By dawn, the cracks in Adrian Colton's empire had become fissures. What began as whispers in the villa spread like wildfire across the world. Daniel Ross, the journalist Emily had trusted, moved fast. Before the sun rose over the Amalfi Coast, news outlets everywhere were blasting headlines. Billionaire Adrian Colton linked to secret offshore accounts in Zurich. $50 million hidden transfer exposed. Colton Enterprises under federal investigation. The villa's once luxurious halls now buzzed with chaos. Investors huddled in corners, their voices sharp with panic. Phones rang endlessly, assistants rushing in and out with updates that only made things worse. By the pool, guests whispered behind their sunglasses, their curiosity laced with disdain. Adrian's name, once spoken with awe, now dripped with scorn. Emily watched it unfold from her balcony. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of release, like chains had fallen from her shoulders. For so long, Adrian had made her feel powerless. Now the truth itself had become her strength. Lucas joined her, holding a newspaper already hot off the press. "It's everywhere," he said quietly. "The SEC has launched an inquiry. His investors are pulling out. Adrian's finished." Emily nodded, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "It's not just about finishing him. It's about freedom. For the first time, I feel free." Meanwhile, Adrian was unraveling. He stormed through the villa, his tie hanging loose, his hair disheveled. The polished, composed billionaire was gone. Vanessa trailed behind, her heels clicking nervously on the marble floor. "Adrian, please," she began. "Don't," he snapped, spinning on her. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "You think I don't know what you're planning? You'll leave me too, won't you? Just like she did." Vanessa's lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. The golden couple facade had shattered. She was already planning her escape. Adrian roared, slamming his fist against the wall. "They think they can destroy me with a few documents. I built this empire from nothing. I am Adrian Colton." But his voice echoed hollowly. No one was listening anymore. By afternoon, the villa was nearly deserted. The investors had fled, journalists camped outside the gates, and Adrian's staff quietly disappeared. He wandered the empty halls like a ghost haunting his own kingdom. Emily, meanwhile, walked through the same halls with a newfound calm. Where once she had felt small under Adrian's shadow, now she carried herself with quiet dignity. Guests and staff alike glanced at her not with pity, but with respect. One of the investors stopped her, his expression weary. "Miss Carter, I owe you an apology. I laughed when Adrian mocked you. I didn't see the truth, but today I do." Emily's voice was steady. "It's not me you should apologize to. It's every person he cheated, every dream he crushed for his greed." The man lowered his head, ashamed. As evening fell, the television in the villa's lounge blared with breaking news. Adrian Colton's accounts were frozen, his board of directors had resigned, and authorities were preparing charges. Emily stood at the doorway, listening. Each headline was another brick crumbling from the empire that had once caged her. Lucas touched her arm gently. "It's over, Emily." She exhaled, her chest rising with relief. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning. For me. For this baby." Across the villa, Adrian sat alone in the dark, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. His phone buzzed endlessly with calls he no longer answered. The empire he had worshipped had abandoned him. And the woman he had discarded, the one he called replaceable, had become the reason it all collapsed. Adrian Colton had finally fallen, and the world was watching. The villa's grandeur was gone. What had once been a palace of wealth and power was now suffocating with scandal. Reporters filled the gates, their cameras flashing with every car that left. Police vehicles idled nearby, a visible reminder that Adrian Colton's days of untouchable luxury were over. That morning, the authorities finally arrived. Emily stood at her balcony, the Mediterranean sun shining on her face as black-suited agents strode into the villa with files, warrants, and a resolve that no amount of money could silence. For years, Adrian had hidden behind charm and intimidation, but today, even his billions could not shield him. Downstairs, Adrian erupted. "You have no right," he shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "This is my property, my business, my life. You can't just walk in here." But the lead agent remained unmoved. "Mr. Colton, you're under investigation for fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. If you cooperate, this will go smoother." Cameras rolled as Adrian was forced into the spotlight he once craved. He had strutted before photographers, parading his wealth and power. Now those same cameras captured his downfall. His tie loose, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale with panic. Vanessa stood nearby, her expression hollow. Once draped proudly on his arm, she now clutched her purse like a lifeline. When reporters shouted questions, she turned her back. The glamorous girlfriend who had been his trophy was finished with the game. Inside, Emily watched the scene unfold. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with release. For months, she had carried the weight of humiliation, betrayal, and danger. Now justice was finally catching up to the man who had tried to erase her. Lucas joined her at the window, his voice steady. "He can't hurt you anymore." Emily nodded, though her eyes still glistened with unshed tears. "It's not just about me. It's about everyone he trampled. All the people who lost because he wanted more." Her thoughts drifted to the investors who had been ruined, the employees discarded like trash, the way Adrian had mocked her dreams as too small. He had taken so much, not just from her, but from everyone who crossed his path. Watching him face consequences wasn't just justice, it was healing. Later, the villa's grand hall filled with reporters as Adrian was led out in handcuffs. The flash of cameras lit up the room like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Colton, how long have you been hiding offshore accounts? Did you threaten your ex-wife? Is it true she exposed you?" Adrian's face twisted in rage. "She's lying. She's nothing without me," he shouted, straining against the agents. But his words, once powerful, now sounded desperate, hollow, pathetic. The reporters turned their cameras toward Emily, who had stepped into the hall. For a moment, she froze under the glare of flashing lights. Then she drew in a breath and lifted her chin. "I'm not here to gloat," she said clearly. "I'm here because no one, no woman, no child, no partner, should ever be made to feel small so someone else can feel powerful. This isn't just my victory. It's proof that truth always wins." The crowd erupted in questions, but Emily didn't waver. She had been humiliated before the world, and now she stood restored before it, stronger, whole. Adrian was dragged past her, his eyes burning with venom. For years he had called her weak, replaceable. But as their gazes locked one last time, the truth was undeniable. She was the one standing tall, and he was the one broken, brought low by the very lies he thought would protect him. The storm had passed. For months, Emily's life had been consumed by fear, betrayal, and the shadow of Adrian's cruelty. But now, the air felt lighter. The villa that once suffocated her with Adrian's arrogance had transformed into a sanctuary of silence, a place where she could finally breathe. Emily sat on the terrace overlooking the sea, the sun dipping low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the rhythmic kicks of the child within. For the first time in so long, her tears weren't from sorrow. They were from relief. Lucas joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one gently before her and took the chair beside her. "How's the little one?" he asked softly. Emily smiled faintly. "Stronger than me some days, but I think we're finally going to be okay." She sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her. Her body was tired, but her spirit felt free. The chains Adrian had wrapped around her heart were gone. She wasn't the broken woman he tried to convince her she was. She was whole. Lucas studied her quietly for a moment. "You stood in front of the world, Emily. You didn't just survive Adrian. You defeated him. That kind of strength, it's rare." Emily shook her head gently. "I didn't do it alone. You stood by me when I couldn't stand by myself. You reminded me that I wasn't weak, even when I believed I was." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "You were never weak. You just needed someone to remind you of your power." A lump formed in her throat. She thought back to the night she had broken down in her suite, certain she couldn't go on. To the ambush in the courtyard, when Vanessa had tried to shame her, to the midnight confrontation in the garden. Each moment had pushed her closer to collapse. But each time, she had found her way back to her feet. Now, with the baby stirring inside her, she understood why. "I had to rise," she whispered. "For me, for this child, for the life we deserve." Lucas smiled, the fading light catching in his eyes. "And now you can. You're free, Emily. Truly free." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and full of promise. The sound of the waves below seemed to echo her heartbeat, calm, steady, alive. For the first time she allowed herself to dream again. She imagined designing nurseries filled with warmth, building homes for families who needed hope, raising her child in a world not of fear, but of love. She imagined laughter echoing through her home instead of harsh words, and a partner beside her who valued her for who she was, not for what she could prove. She turned to Lucas, her voice quiet but certain. "Do you think I can give this baby the life it deserves?" He held her gaze, his expression firm. "Emily, you already have. By surviving, by fighting, by choosing truth over fear. That's the life you're giving your child, a life built on strength and dignity." Her eyes glistened, and this time she didn't hold back the tears. They weren't tears of despair, but of release, of healing. She leaned back, her hands still on her belly, and exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for years. For the first time in a long time, Emily Carter wasn't looking back at what she had lost. She was looking forward to what she had gained, and in the glow of that golden sunset, she finally believed the future was hers to write. Weeks passed, and with them, the storm of scandals surrounding Adrian Colton grew into a hurricane. News outlets dissected every detail of his offshore accounts, his fraudulent schemes, and the empire he had built on lies. He was indicted, his assets frozen, his name dragged through headlines not as a titan, but as a cautionary tale. Emily, meanwhile, had stepped into a new life. She left the villa behind, choosing instead a quiet home by the coast, a modest place filled with light, laughter, and the fresh scent of possibility. For the first time in years, her life wasn't defined by survival. It was defined by choice. One crisp morning, she stood in her new living room, arranging the final touches on a nursery. The walls were painted a soft yellow, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. A crib stood ready, draped with a handmade quilt. She ran her fingers across the fabric, her heart swelling with love. Lucas appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "You've been busy," he said with a smile. Emily turned, her hand resting on her belly. "I wanted it ready. Not just the room, but the life we'll build here. A life without fear." He walked inside, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on her. "You've built more than a nursery, Emily. You've built a future." She felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "For so long, I thought my story was over when Adrian left me. I thought I was broken. But now, I see it was just the beginning." They stepped outside together, the sea stretching endlessly before them. Emily breathed deeply, the salty breeze filling her lungs with freedom. She remembered standing on a similar terrace at the villa, drowning in shame under Adrian's cruel words. Now she stood taller, lighter, as her heart no longer chained. Adrian's downfall had been public and merciless, but she didn't cling to it. Justice had been served, and that was enough. Her victory wasn't in his ruin. It was in her healing, in reclaiming her dignity, in giving her child a world untouched by his darkness. As the days grew closer to her baby's arrival, Emily embraced her new rhythm. Mornings filled with designing cozy homes for local families, afternoons spent preparing for motherhood, evenings shared with Lucas over warm meals and quiet laughter. She no longer lived in fear of headlines or whispers. She lived in the present, and the present was beautiful. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, Lucas took her hand. "Emily," he said softly, "you've faced storms most people wouldn't survive, and you came out stronger. You've inspired more people than you know, including me." Her heart swelled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it alone." He shook his head. "You could have, because the strength was always in you. I just reminded you it was there." Emily smiled, her free hand resting on her belly as her baby kicked gently. "Then I'll remind this child every day that no matter how dark life gets, truth and love will always bring the light back." The waves crashed against the shore below, steady and eternal. Emily looked out at the endless horizon, her chest full of hope. She had been betrayed, humiliated, nearly destroyed, but she had risen, fought back, and reclaimed her life. And now, with her child on the way and love beside her, she stepped fully into her new beginning. Emily Carter was no longer the ex-wife in Adrian Colton's shadow. She was the woman who turned her pain into power and her future into triumph. So that's how the story comes to an end. My dear friends, you're still here with me, right? If you've stayed until now, it must mean something in this story touched your heart in its own way. And maybe that's the real point. We don't just watch drama, we live through it, we feel it. Because deep down, we've all faced moments where life tried to break us. Emily's journey reminds us that no matter how dark the night gets, the morning will come. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And that's exactly what she showed us, turning betrayal into strength, turning pain into power. You see, healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about standing taller because of it. It's about realizing you are never as weak as they made you feel. That's something you can carry into your own life, starting today. If this story stirred something in you, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Because together, we'll keep telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the strength we all carry.